Hello guys, Ryan Ho back with another video. Today we have a special sounding DAC. This is the Ifi Zen Dac V3. And this thing sounds a little bit special because it has a character to it that is very warm. That's what the audiophiles call it. They might call it analog, they might call it, smooth. They call it a lot of things, but really what it sounds like is that it has essentially a lot of your cymbals, your kind of higher pitch voices in your kind of treble essentially gets kind of pushed down, and then a lot of your like bass notes get kind of pushed up a little bit, so it does sound a little bit bassier, and then it sounds a little bit warmer is what they call it, and then it sounds less bright, and it gives the sound a distinct characteristic that's very relaxing, very smooth to listen to. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like the Zen DAC V3, and it's very different from the typical more like neutral type of sound, which doesn't really color the sound really. People call it more transparent, but essentially saying that there's no like added character to it at all, and it just sounds more normal, right? And so that's what this little Ifi Uno sounds like. It's more kind of neutral, more transparent in my opinion, versus if you're looking for the Zen DAC V3, you're looking for something with a little bit more character, and that's why people are really into this. Now, the other thing about the Zen DAC V3 that's special to me personally is that it was actually one of the first things I reviewed, and then that's kind of got my channel going and reviewing more and more products. So the Zen DAC V3 is a little bit special to me, but at the same time, I feel like the Zen DAC V3 is a product that, when I first reviewed it, it was like $170. Nowadays, it's like $230. So it definitely kind of creeped up in price over time. I believe the prior version was $200 and now it's $230, right? So it is getting more expensive. So we'll talk about if it's worth it and for the sound quality that it has, right? So the Zen DAC V3 has definitely changed since the predecessor. So you can kind of see they kind of changed the design look. So it has that little cut through the middle nowadays, and it has kind of this metal chassis at the bottom. And then for some reason they put this like matte like plastic on top. It's like the only piece that's like not metal on this whole entire build quality. I mean, you can see the top plate, it's just this nice sturdy metal, and you can tell from the back as well. And 360, it really has this nice chassis, except for this one part, they just decided to give it a tune tone color and make it plastic. I wish they didn't do that, but maybe on the Zen DAC V4, they'll make that all metal as well. But I do think the new look looks kind of cool with the cutout through the middle and giving it more, I guess, color and more flavor to it. Now this device has changed since predecessor, so now it comes with USB type C on the back. So you definitely have a little bit upgrade instead of the standard kind of USB type, I think B it was before. And then this is really the same kind of balanced DAC amp that people are expecting. So it has better separation, you have better sound stage, it kind of sounds a little bit wider because of it. Now the front of this has, it has power match, which is just essentially gain, so it goes louder or quieter. And then it has X bass, which is a bass boost, which they did improve their bass boost on this, so this sounds really, really good. And they call it, instead of like true bass, I think it's just like, I guess X bass, they like renamed it, but they did definitely improve it a little bit. And then they have this nice volume dial. Now the one thing about this device is that it doesn't really turn off, which I thought was kind of weird. Like unless you unplug the USB, it really just is always on, which is a very interesting type of design. Unless you turn off your computer or PC, then it would turn off, right? Now the other aspect of this is it has a 4.4 balance cable, so you can connect it through balance, and it has the normal 1/4 inch adapter, right? So really this thing hasn't changed so much besides the look and the kind of input options. They also is able to play like higher res instead of like 384, plays like 760 like 4 or whatever. But like I don't really feel like a lot of people have access to that music, to be honest. Like I don't even think Apple Music streams that high. So it is a nice addition, but not something that many people are gonna use, right? But yeah, so let's talk about sound. So the sound definitely has that like warm characteristic that I talked about earlier. It's definitely very, very warm versus something like their Ifi Uno, which is a lot cheaper. I think it's like $70. It's a lot more neutral in character, and it's a lot cheaper in price, right? You can basically buy 3 of these for the price of one of these. But it was a very interesting comparison because I feel like the Uno actually in some ways sounds a little bit more resolving than the Zen DAC V3. They use a different DAC chip. This uses the ES Sabre one, while this uses a Burr Brown. But there's definitely differences in them that I feel like the Uno does sound brighter overall, but it also sounds like faster. Like all the details kind of are better separated a little bit on the Uno. However, then when you go to like the Zen DAC V3, let's say you're upgrading to it, right? You do definitely hear a bigger sound stage. Like it's very clear that it's a lot wider. So this is definitely a lot better in that aspect. And then the mid-range on this is just a lot better as well. It definitely has a little bit better like texture to the mid-range. So like a lot of like your voices just sound a little bit, they have like a little bit more bottom end to it, because this thing just sounds like it just has a little bit more bass or bass bloom to it. So it just sounds a little bit punchier in that sense for the kind of lower end sound. So it definitely gives the mid-range a kind of a nice sound to it. But you know, ultimately, I think it's funny how it seems less kind of resolving or snappy sounding than the Uno, which to me is like a little bit sad, a little bit of shame that the Uno can resolve a little bit more. But obviously there's the, you know, distinct advantage of the soundstage, like I said. But overall, I would say this is definitely a very, very nice device if you want something with a lot of character, like I said. I think a lot of audiophiles who are looking for a different type of sound, a smoother type of sound. A lot of people would say, like, you know, if you have a brighter type of headphone, you would kind of pair it with this, or you kind of want a little bit more bass to come out, you would pair it with this DAC amp. So that's definitely one of the kind of benefits. Of course, it also has like the X bass boost, right? That can boost even more bass if you really want it. So that's kind of the thing. But I would say if you're really just into a more boring, just kidding, not really boring, but it's a more neutral type of sound, this is what I'm more into. Like, as I feel like as I listen to more different kind of devices, I don't really want my DAC amp to like increase like character or just add any type of change in sound. I just want to hear the music as it is. And so I do think the Uno is kind of a value proposition and something that people would look into. And the funny thing about the Uno too is that if you actually look at the measurements of the SNR and the DNR, but basically their signal to noise ratio, it actually scores higher than the Zen DAC from the own manufacturer's website. Even when they measure it, the Uno does outperform it in measurements. So that's pretty funny in my opinion. And that's why I feel like, because I like thought it sounded better and it kind of confirms it in the measurements. So that's, you know, a little interesting too. But if you want something more neutral, definitely go for their kind of Ifi Zen Dac signature. I feel like that one also sounded like significantly more cleaner to me as well. So if you go up the line, you can get something better. So the Zen DAC V3 to me is something that you would simply buy if you want the character, but if you want resolution and transparency, then you can probably buy, you know, the other type of stuff they have. So anyways, in conclusion, for me, I think the Zen DAC V3 isn't my favorite thing on the menu. I feel like it just has too much character for me that I'm not really looking to. But you know, I wouldn't mind it if it had a lot of character, but it was also resolving. But I feel like it's just not resolving enough. Like I said, I feel like the cheaper device can outdo it a little bit in that regard. So I do think the Zen DAC could be improved in that aspect. However, you know, there's not really many DACs with that warm characteristic now. They used to have the Ifi Neo, which also had that very warm type of sound, but the new one no longer has that. So there really isn't many things that does what this does. So if you're looking for that, it definitely kind of stands out in that regard. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video useful. Please like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next video.